Haman Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Haman.
Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. On today's episode, I am going to share with you the latest episode of the Natural Order podcast that I do with Brian D. O'Leary. This one is really interesting. For those who are annoyed by our immigration struggles, this is an interesting argument Brian came up with about how we might address the issue. And I can't wait for you to hear it. Enjoy.
Back to the matters at hand, Adam. I have an article that is out for submission, shall we say. And if nothing happens with it, it's going to go up on my Substack and probably the Natural Order podcast Substack. And I wanted to sit down and we wanted to sit down and talk about it because I have a couple arguments that I fashioned myself that I think with talking to you, nobody that you've heard about even.
No, I agree. You were kind
about
enough to share your article with me, and I was fascinated by it. It's motivated by the immigration crisis that is afflicting the Western world, probably the whole world, but I mostly care about the Western world. There is just a problem with unfettered, not natural immigration that's occurring. And the poor citizens of these countries, ourselves included, are just sort of having this thrust upon them with all sorts of deleterious side effects. And you came up with, in your article, an argument, a constitutional argument against such behavior that I thought was fascinating, was worth getting together with you and talking about.
Yeah, we mentioned it a bit on, I'd been working on this. So we mentioned it a bit on the last podcast. So just going forward, I use the Third Amendment argument, which I'd never seen argued. You know, it's the least controversial amendment in the entire, least controversial text in the entire Constitution. It seems like there's been no case law, at least on the Supreme Court level, that has ever taken the Third Amendment and done anything with it. Third Amendment is the law, where you can't quarter soldiers.
The government cannot force you to take in foreign soldiers and feed and clothe them.
So the amendment is simple. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. And as I was thinking about this, I said, well, what does the Third Amendment say? That's exactly what it says. So you can't have a Navy SEAL in your house. The government can't force you to put a Navy SEAL in your house or a Redcoat or, a Ukrainian National Army guy or whatever it is. They can't do that for whatever reason. It used to happen under the colonial rule. So, but what could it mean? So I'm talking specific, strict constitutionalist, whatever they call that, Scalia type interpretation. The amendment is what it says.
Well, let's, I think your argument is great. Let's go back in time and talk about what that actually meant when people were forced to quarter these redcoats. I assume most of the time it was.
Yeah.
And quarter meant that they had to, out of their own pocket, provide food and shelter to these people.
Yeah, as far as I understand it, and it had to do with the what they call the Quartering Acts, which were part of the Mutiny Acts, which resulted in or came from the deposition of King James II in England. And if you were against him, you were going to get, and you were part of the army, I guess, or Navy, I guess would to work. But if you stayed loyal to King James, this act you could be court-martialed in peacetime England and the sentence is death for not being loyal or devoted to the new King William and Queen Mary. So these acts of parliament have to be renewed every year. These things. So about a century later, after the Boston Tea Party and all this fun stuff, French and Indian Wars before that, they had the quartering acts in the colonies, the 13 colonies, which required the colonists to quarter British regulars, and or even give up their house to, maybe a a colonel or something higher up. It's ridiculous. But what it did was save Parliament a bunch of money. They didn't have to. This is the way they got around taxing the local citizen, because they were already feeling the heat that we were getting taxed way too much here, stateside or colony side, I guess it would have been at the time.
Yeah, that's the whole point for our purposes here. This wasn't just some weird, quaint imposition of history. These people were being taxed.
Yeah.
And and this exact same situation is happening now, right? I mean, that's why this argument is so brilliant.
Right. And
Our
then,
taxes are being used to quarter these immigrants.
I call it
who
a
are
distinction without a difference.
exactly, yeah. I mean, think about zooming into like a municipality, even a big one like New York City. What is happening when the government is using your taxpayer dollars to pay these hotels to house immigrants, plus all these other social programs that they're being lavished with at the expense of the citizenry? I mean, it's getting pretty close to being forced to, especially when the ideology of these immigrants, not all obviously, but a disturbing number of them, they're not here to embrace the American dream and just live a good life. They're here to their preferred form of government is not our own, and they would love to change that. I mean, that's what Sharia is. And anybody who is
I
prone,
call them soldiers, but by a different. We're not calling them soldiers, but they're essentially foreign soldiers or allegiant to, if they're armed, which often they are. The bell curve suggests this, that not all of these migrants and refugees are peaceable human beings. There's a good amount of them that come in armed and hostile to the host
right?
nation.
Each and every one of them that's willing to use violence on American citizens should be viewed as a foreign army personnel. I mean, they're not peaceful. And so if your government is taxing you to quarter these people in and amongst yourselves, what do you call that if not a violation of the Third Amendment? I liked your
Right.
argument, Brian. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and so I think if you had loose construction of this, what could it mean? You could throw anything at it, right? So does the
Sure.
Third Amendment now have teeth? Is what I ask. I don't know. I don't think that anybody is really going to go down this line of argumentation in the government, but I think they should at least consider it.
Yeah, I think the teeth of your argument isn't going to be some legal, action.
Right.
What the purpose is, if it catches on, it's an adjustment in your frame of reference to change the way you think about things. Is what the government is doing, here, American, and should we keep doing it? I don't think anybody's going to bring a constitutional, claim against anybody here. That's just not how our system works anymore. But if it changes the way people think, that's good enough.
Yeah, moving what do they call it? The Overton window.
Yeah.
Just think about these things in a new way, and I'd be interested in see if we can do that. But like I said, I'll have this article out, but probably by the time this podcast is released, it should be up and at 'em, and it should be in the show notes. Because I think there's a lot to be said for it. I mean, there could be an entire book or academic paper written about this. Mine is just a strong personal voice.
You have it in your article, but I've forgotten.
Mhm.
What was the number on the list of grievances that this particular
13 of 20. It came from the Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of
It was the
Independence? Yeah, so
13th
it
of
was so
27 total.
irritating It was so
Yeah.
irritating to the people who overthrew the British Empire's control
Oh
of
yeah.
North America that it was listed in the grievances as number 13 of whatever you said, 27.
Yeah.
And we made it the third
The third
amendment
amendment.
of the Constitution, which,
Yeah.
which should make you think it's not something quaint. It was a big deal to people who thought of themselves as free, that they were being forced to use their precious resources to house people in their homes and feed them, who
Mhm.
were antithetical to their peace and prosperity. And
Mhm.
look around, ladies and gentlemen. Is not the same thing happening to us right now? I
Yeah.
mean, we're being taxed for a whole bunch of things that are un-American. I mean, we talk about it a lot on this show. We've moved far and away from a free society. But as you pointed out, Brian, hardly anyone mentions the innocuous Third Amendment to the Constitution. But I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, and I think what happens is we've been thrown off a little bit. They're thrown off the scent a bit. We for generations perhaps we talked about the Mexican immigration problem. We even talked about this on the last episode we did, Adam. And I think you mentioned that that it was a manageable issue. I mean, if done right, yeah, there were immigrants coming in, and there's immigration raids and all this stuff, but it was a manageable problem, particularly on the West Coast, and
Right.
it was not an issue really when you get east of the Mississippi. Usually, it's not even really a concern. It's Mexicans. Mexican immigration is typically along the southern border, Texas, and west to California, and north from there. But um, when you nowadays, the Mexican immigration is not really a problem. It's not the Mexicans
Right.
coming in mass to the United States anymore. It's people from further south and from continents and nations on the other side of the globe. They stack up in Mexico and then charge over the border, and it was
Yes.
feckless. It was feckless during the Biden administration.
As we said on that last show, it's not natural, this pattern of migration.
No, they're flying them in on planes to,
And
and then
as you were talking, it got me thinking. I do believe that we need a lot of immigration, and I do believe historically it's been manageable. And I think there's three primary components. Um, One is that it is, again, natural and not something forced by some foreign government or some NGO, or God help us, our own CIA, if things like that are what's happening here. So it has to be something that's just organic, organic migration. And the second is the people that come here want to come here because they value and respect our legal tradition. Like I said before, if they want to come live the American dream and be peaceful and work hard, usually people say pay their taxes at that point in the clause, but I don't want you to pay your taxes. I don't want to pay them myself. But anyway, if you share our values and want to come here and work side by side with us, that's great. That's the second point. And the third point that matters whether immigration is good or not good is if the existing citizenry are being taxed to subsidize the practice. And that's what's happening to us right now, which is why so many Americans are so upset about these migrants. I mean, they're turning into xenophobes and racists, and a lot of it is just the fact that
we're labeled as such.
well, yeah, but even some of it's true. And if you're being fleeced by your government for the benefit of people who don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't talk like you, and seem to actively hate you, that
Mhm.
will create genuine racism and xenophobia. That's not irrational. It's
Mhm.
unfortunate, and we should fight against it. But there's a reason people feel this way. It's not stupid. It's not just some backwards hicks who aren't multicultural enough and aren't cosmopolitan. The actions of behavior of our government is making Americans racist. And look at Western Europe. It's even worse over there.
Yeah, then my article started, talking Dateline Dublin,
Right.
where this is a story not readily reported on in the United States media, but this fella on Twitter he said, while Irish restaurants are closing down on a daily basis, a new Somalian restaurant has opened up in Dublin. It's an extremely uncomfortable feeling to witness your people, culture, and history disappear before your eyes. Ireland is no longer, or it's getting less and less Irish by the day.
Right.
They're I don't even know the policy why they're doing this, but specifically, Somalians and East Africans and Pakistanis those are the people that are coming into Ireland, for crying out loud. Like, this is an entirely different population, and it's been, like you said, the Irish people are being taxed.
Yeah.
They're building huge dormitories for these people, and if they don't like it, they're not of the same culture, of the same beliefs. They are oftentimes the people that have been kicked out of their own countries for hideous crimes they've committed, and they're committing the hideous crimes now abroad in London, England, and it's been a problem there for generations too. So, I don't know. There's no easy solution to this problem other than to get people thinking about, the way I think about it is America for Americans. I don't care who you are. If you're an American, you should stand up for America. Not American, not the neocon version of it, but America. It's where I live. It's my home.
Yeah, I'm going to make a case for freedom because hardly anybody ever talks about it because it's so far in the distance. We're nowhere near it. But if there were no oppressive government, by which I mean no government, and all property was private property, and who comes and who goes, that decision was made by the owner of said property and contract and whatnot. And if in that exchange, or if in that environment of freedom, the people of Ireland, supply and demand made it such that the culture of Ireland diminished somewhat and the culture of Somalia rose somewhat, just because natural immigration patterns based on freedom of association of various people and private property, if that's just the way it shook out, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I mean, maybe I'd have a problem, but who would I complain to? It wouldn't be one person oppressing another person and forcing the culture to change.
Well, there's no natural reason for Somalis to immigrate to
There,
Ireland or
I
Pakistanis.
totally agree. But if, if bizarre coincidence and global cultural shift X happened in a totally free market and it happened, okay, great. But that's not what we're seeing now. As you mentioned, we're seeing nefarious actors using stolen money to force this culture into Ireland when most of the citizens are not particularly happy about it, and they're very not happy about being forced to subsidize it and just tolerate it and have it done to them. Again,
Yeah.
this isn't a xenophobia
This is
issue.
a country that a century ago fought a war to extricate themselves from British rule.
Yeah. And now they're being invaded by people from some other continent.
And they're not doing it. It's like we don't have those people there anymore. Just like in America, we don't have the fellows that pitch the tea off the boats into the harbor. We don't have those type of people in mass, or enough of them to make a blip, really, even in the radar, if you will. And
Well, the reason I bring it up is because too often I see the argument against this forced unnatural immigration paid for by taxpayers. Too often I see the issue argued on a xenophobic ultra nationalist front, when I think that just misses the point. It's not like we don't want any Somali restaurants or whatever. It's that we don't want this forced upon us and us forced to pay for it. It's the force that's the problem. It's not that there's extra brown people milling around and eating their funky food or whatever. The force is the whole crux of the problem. And unfortunately, most right wingers just sort of gloss over that. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because they have their own visions of what state power can do to other people against their will. But I want freedom. And if you had freedom, you wouldn't get all this forced migration put on your head. That's the way I'd like the argument to be framed,
Perhaps it's not going to happen. So I think we've
I
got to
know.
deal in real politics here. So
I don't know if you saw it, Brian, but
my people having the power is better than the other people having the power. That's what I see today. And I think, I don't know if you have one more point, but we were going to.
Just one brief one.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I am all about real politics. I'm a libertarian who was thrilled that Trump won, for example. Voted for him all 3 times just because the alternatives are so awful. But I wrote a couple of months ago on my Substack, maybe we'll link to it, an article that, one of the biggest threats to liberty right now is whatever these WEF globalists have in mind for us. There's a lot of people who vision a one world liberal government to enslave us all, and I oppose that vehemently. And that means that my current political bedfellows are often nationalists because they oppose globalism. And I'm totally fine working with such people. We share a common aim, but once we defeat the globalists, if we're lucky enough to do so, then I'm going to have a problem with the nationalists too, because I don't like, I certainly don't want to be ruled here in Nevada by Brussels, but I also am not thrilled about being ruled by Washington, D.C. I want my political power decentralized as much as possible to the point of dissipating to nothing. That's what I want.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. And I think over the last, ever since I've been alive, that's an actual strong position to take. However, we've been opposed. People like us, or people like me, anyway, I'm going to speak for myself. We've been opposed at every stop by the left.
Yeah.
And the left has taken everything they do and infested itself in every molecule of the culture and the government. So it was the government was entirely controlled. The media is entirely controlled. Now we're seeing a bit of a shift. I don't know that it's Trump, particularly Donald Trump, but it's the movement that he's created is recognizing that, hey, we have control now, and we're getting these people out. And the second topic we were going to talk about today, this might be a good transition here, Adam, is Elon and his DOGE, whatever you want to call it, the bulldozer, getting these people out of there. And, you see all this kvetching and whining online about, oh, I lost my job because Elon came in and closed down my department. I was like, too bad. Like, how many people got fired for not telling their medical history, whether they got a shot or not, to continue working or continuing interacting in public life? That's never talked about here. I don't care about the people losing their job in the government that they had no reason to have it to begin with. It's just they got lucky having a great paying job where they didn't have to report to work. They're sitting at home and they're just doing essentially nothing, and I'm paying for it. That is, I'm fine for Elon to say whoever he is. I mean, yeah, in this old system, a guy like Elon, hey, he wouldn't be involved. This is extra governmental or whatever. You have to go through the Congress. I don't care. I do not care what the system is. These people need to get out. Our people need to get in, and then we'll sort it out when that comes. Like for forever, I would say not forever, but probably since 2004, 20 years, call it, I've been on the side of libertarians, by and large, because these were the only people that were addressing some of the problem. I'm not a libertarian. I've never claimed to be one. I'm libertarian adjacent. We do the show together. You're plumb line libertarian. I just frankly not. I disagree with a lot of the things, but these are political bedfellows, warm political bedfellows for me,
for sure.
Or at least have been. And I'm worried that I want our people to get in and get in power and get in positions where they can just, you talked earlier about the taxing of the American public. That's a huge thing. Libertarians are against the tariff, for instance, by and large. I am pro-tariff. I'm an economic nationalist. What it does is puts the burden of taxation on other governments, other countries, libertarians, a lot of economics, pretty much most of the economic profession would disagree. But I'm like, okay, well, we're already taxing our people with the income tax, 50% roughly, by and large, over across the board. Why does not that burden shift? Yeah, I'm still going to be paying taxes with the tariff. I completely agree. But if we got rid of the IRS and got Elon and Donald's ERS in place instead, I think we'd be cooking with gas. But
also, I mean, one of the reasons I'm closely aligned with people like you and people on the right is that most of the government's expense, none of us want. If the government were pared down to, forget how small I want to make it, if we even just pared it down to how small you want to make it, we wouldn't need an income tax. And we wouldn't need much in the way of tariffs either. They could be low and uniform to the point where, I might grumble a little bit when I'm taking a shower or whatever, but I wouldn't go to the streets and march against it or anything like that. And what's happening with DOGE, I just love. I love that he's getting in there, and it's not just, kicking people out of their offices and forcing people to quit working from home and all those buyout options that Trump did. Those are all great. But what I really love is the shift in the zeitgeist where people are no longer asleep about the horrible form and function of our oppressive, wretched, disgusting government. People were shocked when they heard about what USAID actually did.
So I want to address that for a second. USAID, we all knew or had intimations that this is a left-wing racket. But then they expose all their line item of what they're spending money on, and then they total it up. But then you have the, I don't know, what do you call it, black pillar types. They're like, it's just a drop in the bucket. Like, why are we concerned with that? It's like, to your point, Adam, it's like, this is what they're spending money. Why should they spend a single cent on it?
Yeah, I don't even think that's a black-pilled argument either.
That once you start peeling back the onion.
Yeah, that's not a black-pilled argument either. You hear that from people who favor what they're doing. And their argument is, well, it's so small, so why are you even complaining? But no, this is evil at its core, and it's used as a CIA cutout to overthrow governments we don't like in South America and Eastern Europe and all over the globe. And it's horrible. And that's before you even get to the slush fund of anti-American left-wing.
If they didn't spend any money at all, it's horrible.
Yes, it's ridiculous. And they're spending our money. And I love that, again, it's being brought out. It's being, like, I'm kind of pessimistic. I'm not thrilled that the organization is being, shunted over into the State Department, where Marco Rubio, of all people, is going to be, we might see, if the zeitgeist doesn't keep moving in the right direction, we might see nothing change, except it's just an official arm of the State Department instead of a quote unquote NGO. By the way, folks,
Marco Rubio, though, like, I am no fan. His rhetoric, however, being the mouthpiece of
he's doing his boss's bidding. I like that.
He's like, I don't trust him as far as I could throw little Marco, but like, I'm all right. I was dubious on the choice of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, but he's like, I don't want wars. Like, okay, go Marco.
We're old enough to have been burned by politicians' words for a long time. So I'm distrustful, like you, keep glancing over, but I love the direction. I love the thrust of it. I hope he gets us out of these wretched wars. I have more faith in the Ukraine one than the Gaza one. But I love the direction things are going. I can't believe nobody assassinated him. I can't believe people aren't pushing back more. I mean, every day I look around and read what's happening, and I'm like, did we win? Or are they just letting us blow off some steam, and then all these crooked things will just get renamed and repackaged and repurposed? Like I was about to say, NGO is a complete lie. There's no such thing as a non-governmental organization.
Right.
It gets fed your tax money and operates. It's just a way to skirt around the Constitution. It's so clumsy and stupid. I can't believe we ever put up with this. The government's not allowed to do X, Y, and Z because of the Constitution. But if we fund an NGO and it does that, I guess that's fine, right? What?
Yeah, like calling this just defenestration of these NGOs or whatever you want to call them, is calling that racist and this, that. Like, come on. Like, we played this game before.
Right?
We're not,
Doesn't work anymore.
it's not racist. It's just, this is stupid. And, you have these people on the left, they're so stuck on calling Donald Trump, a racist and all these other things. It's like, where do you even get that? Like, you just go to Joe Biden is an actual racist man. The Bill Clinton, very racist man. Like, the policies, like, go to Arkansas and what he did there. Go to back into the 70s and 80s and see what Joe Biden was doing in Congress. Racist to the core. So, like, what are we doing? What are we talking? Because he's against you or your leftism, you drop
that's
this
it.
racist bomb on him, and he's
This isn't a show about psychology exactly. But what's happening here is an emotion in search of a noun. These people hate Trump for whatever reason, and so they grasp and find racist, Nazi, whatever thing, sexist, I guess. But yeah, they're not. You're trying to find reasons. There's not reasons there. They hate him for whatever reason.
It's Trump derangement syndrome. And Elon, I think, was on Hannity the other night, or Donald and Elon were on getting interviewed. I saw this tweet this morning, and Elon says they call it like Trump derangement syndrome. You don't realize how real this is until you can't reason with people. I was at a friend's birthday party in LA. This was before the election. I was at a friend's birthday party in LA, a nice quiet dinner, and I happened to mention the president's name. He says, and it was like they got shot with a dart in the jugular that contained like methamphetamine and rabies. Okay. And they're like, he does this sound and he's like, what's wrong, guys? You can't just have a normal conversation. It's like they become completely irrational. So this is what we're talking about. It's Trump derangement syndrome. And I hate it. I generally hated that whole idea, like, oh, you got Trump derangement syndrome if you don't like everything, lockstep what Trump is doing. But we're not talking about that. There are people accused of Trump derangement syndrome that are legit critics. I mean, I would count ourselves among them. I'm not too vocal on the criticism right now because I want to see things moving in a direction and not forestall it. However, I've written, podcasted, all this stuff about my dislike for some of the things Donald Trump does and has done. However, we've never deserved him. This man.
That's true.
He's hilarious.
Yeah, and he's got the whole government acting like they're not so pompous and stiff anymore, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
I think JD Vance called someone an idiot on Twitter here recently. It's like that never happens.
Yeah.
I do love that.
Yeah.
I don't think these politicians should be revered. I don't like it when they pretend to be these, stuffed shirts, when they act like the Greek gods we're all supposed to think they are. I like that they're more human. Yeah. And like you said earlier, I just like I think one of the silver linings of COVID is that people don't trust government anymore. They never should have, and now they don't. They don't trust experts, quote unquote. They're starting to understand that people all have interests, that public choice theory isn't just something you read in a dusty old economics textbook. Politicians don't lose their human nature when they get elected. They're still greedy and venal and self-interested. Nothing's changed. I think we're leaning towards being a more healthy populace who doesn't just have this blind trust anymore. And I am all about it. When right after Trump got elected, I was on the first ever Contra cruise with Tom Woods and Bob Murphy, celebrating their show Contra Crewman.
Yeah, the Tom Woods cruise coming up here, guys.
I'm very excited. Yeah, finally,
Adam's on his way here in the next couple of days.
But some reporter snuck her way in there. I mean, I guess didn't sneak.
I heard about this.
To write a hit. Her point was to write a hit piece on this weird right-wing, anti-Keynesian, anti-Krugman group of people who get together on a cruise to celebrate it. And she got largely defused by how awesome we were and the fact that Tom was so upfront with her. But anyway, I'm quoted in that article. I don't remember if this was part of it, but at some point she was talking to me and asked me what I thought about Trump. And I said, I think it's great. So she started scribbling, and I said, well, hold on. You didn't hear why. I've hated every president that's been elected in my lifetime. And I just am thrilled that now with this one, so many people hate him, hate the president too. It's like, yay, finally.
Yeah.
And then I had no idea it would get to be, I mean, I could never have predicted in 2016, what the deep state was going to do to his presidency. And in doing so, let the masks slip and out themselves the way they had. And then to have Biden come in and be as corrupt and obvious and naked as he was and is, and the mask slips even more. And then what he did to us over COVID and all the lies and all the oppression. And then to have Trump come along, like we've talked about before, his second presidency, if he hadn't been, ousted by whatever shenanigans were done to get Biden to quote unquote win that election, his second term would have been terrible. If that hadn't happened. And now I'm excited about the possibilities of his second term. We might actually see the box get shaken. The corrupt, enormous, oppressive, expensive, murderous box we call government is getting a good shaking.
Yeah,
and right in front of the public to observe it. And I'm thrilled.
You mentioned the deep state. I'm not entirely sold on the theory as you are, but I think if you're talking about it in broad strokes, the media would certainly be part of it. And you had an incredibly hostile media. You still do. But in 2016, you had an incredibly hostile media. 2020 got even more hostile, it seemed like, anyway, because they thought that Trump was essentially just a pretender. And they actually actively encouraged Donald Trump to run because they thought it was such a joke, but they didn't understand the people. Now you fast forward to 2024, and this media structure has been not totally cut out at the knees, but it's been deracinated day by day more and more.
It's unstoppable.
And you have a lot of these independent outlets, naturalorderpodcast.com. That's where you go. And you have Twitter, X, and all these other places, YouTube, HamanNature.com. And you have all these places where people can, and it wasn't just these people that you had to have a badge or some degree or, get into this society, this secret society of journalists in order to, and they write hard news, but it's sprinkled with opinion. I'm out. We're here. We're like, we're telling you the news, but we're also opinionated on where this news should head. So
and the public has spoken. The public has spoken. Like more people listen to Megyn Kelly now than ever anybody did. Back when she was on cable news.
And or the Today Show.
I think that. Yeah, geez. I think that's great. I think, again, it's part of that cultural zeitgeist where people are waking up and going, oh, the talking heads aren't telling me the truth. I need to search elsewhere. And people need to prove every day why I should listen to them. And we're only seeing the beginnings of this. It's like a dam has burst and the water's going everywhere. I don't know where it's going to end up, but it's going to be in a way more natural place after than it was before. The stranglehold the deep state and corporate media had on information was poisoning us, and that's gone now.
Yeah, and I see a lot of President's Day was earlier this week, and I write probably more than the average, certainly more than the average bear about Richard Nixon's presidency. So I see a lot of parallels, particularly with Trump. You had Nixon come in and landslide victory, which Trump didn't. He's kind of reversed this whole thing. And then the media was so hostile to a Republican because they were, the left was getting all the gravy from JFK and LBJ and all that stuff. And Nixon comes in with a mandate, essentially. So we're going to shut this down. He didn't do a great job, but that was the idea. He didn't have an Elon on his side, like coming in and wielding the hammer. He was trying to be diplomatic to all the Americans and all sides, and the news media would not have it. And they initiated this essentially a coup, which resulted in Watergate against President Nixon. But Nixon had these landslide electoral victories, and he was liked, he was loved, way more than Trump, and they turned him into a demon.
I know.
But now you have this media structure that was so powerful back then. You had the three networks, and you had the New York Times, Washington Post. You still have that stuff, but they're nowhere nearly as powerful with all this other stuff we're talking about. So I'm hopeful in the future that we get more of the grassroots groundswell, whatever you want to call it.
I agree.
Yeah.
If let's just take for granted for a moment that our optimism about the future is well founded, and that something meaningful and permanent that reduces the size and scope of government occurs because of Trump's second presidency and Elon and DOGE and whatever Vivek does in the future, Ramaswamy. Let's assume that all our hopes and dreams.
Won't do anything great.
The future is uncertain. But I want to emphasize your point that this couldn't have happened until now, and it's for a lot of reasons. Like the public wanted something different when they voted for Nixon, but they didn't know what they wanted.
Right.
And the right, in particular, was still too enamored with government power for anything serious to change. I think you needed to have that sentiment, and then you needed to have people like Pat Buchanan out there talking in sensible ways all this time, and then you had to have people like Ron Paul.
Yeah.
Have his two amazing presidential runs, three really, but the two that counted were in the GOP.
Yeah.
And that, he started to build a movement. He started to get some attention. It didn't crack the system. And then you needed to have the change in technology come along to make avenues of communication pop up that let us get around these gatekeepers. And you needed the confluence of all those threads throughout history to get us here. And again, I hope this isn't a mirage. I hope this isn't a fever dream in the prison cell.
That's the worry, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we wake up and go, "Oh no, nothing's changed."
Yeah, and I think, I always brace myself about being too hopeful, but particularly since you mentioned this could happen, in consecutive Trump terms, and like what I always think about though, however. Even if what we hope or what DOGE has planned doesn't come to fruition, how much worse would it have been with Kamala Harris? Like, it would have been extraordinarily worse. They would have still had the levers of power. The media would have been more emboldened, and we'd be way less free.
The grip would have just tightened.
3 weeks or whatever. Like, where's my calendar? Like, 3 weeks.
We're still stuck in the grip of an anaconda, but the grip is loosened, and there's a chance we might get out. If that drunken idiot plant of a vice president, if Kamala Harris had won, the anaconda would have squeezed even harder, to the point where I don't know if we could have ever gotten out.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm thankful that it didn't happen. I'm not entirely.
She would probably, her FEC would probably shut down the internet, right? I mean, if they're finding that their power is chosen by a free internet, well, I know how to fix that. China fixed it.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk would be probably in jail.
He'd be in jail, yeah. And maybe not even an American jail. Maybe they would have shipped him off to some country in Europe and hung him by his toes. A lot of people were at serious risk if things had gone a different way.
Donald Trump would be. I don't know if he'd be in jail right now, but he'd be mired in more and more lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits that he's had to fend off over the last several years.
I assume that would only increase. I mean, if they get away with that, they'd go after anybody, right?
Yeah.
They'd probably throw Tucker Carlson in jail, and I don't know who else.
Yeah. I mean, let's not fearmonger, but the Natural Order podcast might be a thing of the past too.
I mean, we wouldn't make it past the FEC if they determined that we monitor and regulate content on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Mike Show wouldn't make it.
No, I mean, I'm only half joking. So
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we I was about to say ducked a bullet, and then I remember what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. This has been such a weird ride, Brian.
Totally.
I don't believe in the simulation theory or anything like that, but I think it's a fundamental construct. And in that frame, this video game is getting really, really interesting. We're getting up to the high levels, and I'm just amazed at everything that's going on and how dramatic it is. What a gripping ride.
Yeah, it is gripping, and it's for me, it's been a lot more fun. I was nervous, man, in November.
Yeah.
Because I saw all the signs pointing to maybe even worse than what happened in the past. And luckily, enough people smartened up, wisened up, got to, blast a cold water on their face or something, that they said, all right, well, I'm either going to vote or not vote.
Yeah.
I'm no longer going to vote for the Democrats, but I'm not going to vote for Trump. Fine. I don't care. Fine. Or, that somebody was fence leaner said, I'm finally going to vote for Trump here. Good. Fine. As long as you don't, my position the whole time was, you have a moral imperative not to vote for Harris. And there's still a lot of grossly immoral people in the United States. My way I sit here, but
I mean, I totally get your point. I try to throw those people a bit of a moral bone, just because I know how much for most people it isn't really morality.
No,
that is what's going on here. We're tribal. We're a very tribal species, and once you've picked a side, you just go along with it. And that's just as ugly and has such pernicious effects. But it's not like these people are irredeemable. They just need to be in a better environment, and then they'd go along with the better thing. These are the people who used to just reflexively say it's a free country, and now they say something worse, something more big government, pro-statism, left-leaning, but they're just going along with the cultural zeitgeist. They're not.
Yeah, building a better environment. I like that. I like that term. Where that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're not.
Yes.
We're not trying to kneecap my opposition. Yeah, come on in. It's going to be a better swim here, folks.
Yeah. That's why I was so. I totally agree. Dave Smith was one of my heroes, part of the problem. And when Zuckerberg came out and said he's totally changing, his censorship policy or whatever it was on Facebook or Meta or whatever he's calling it, I don't trust Zuckerberg either, and he's obviously just going whichever way the wind blows. But I was just shocked that Dave and Robbie were lambasting him so badly. It's like, guys, this is what winning looks like.
Yeah.
Most people just go along with the crowd. It's not like every single person who now is doing the right thing does so because they've had a firm change in their convictions and they see the error of their ways. That's not how humans work.
I mean, let's talk about we don't have a whole lot of time left here, but let's talk about Elon and the way he was, thought about by the left.
Yeah.
Maybe even 4 short years ago or 3 years ago even. And then now you have Sheryl Crow virtue signaling, sending her Tesla off and donating the money to some left-wing organization or something like that. It's like,
what are you
idiot doing? By the way, I'm on record hating Sheryl Crow for the last 30 years or whatever she's been on. I think she sucks to begin with. So this is nothing new. Anyway,
I liked her first album. No, I think you're right. It's a totally stupid and vain, demonstration of your moral virtue. And I see people driving around town here in Vegas with Teslas that have got that annoying bumper sticker that says something like Tesla owners against Elon or something like that. They couldn't stand to be driving around in a car, which they obviously love, thinking that the person behind me might think I tacitly support everything Elon Musk is doing. What a dumb way to go through your life, thinking you need to signal that somehow. That's pathetic. If anybody out there is listening to this show who does that, I can't imagine that Venn diagram is anything but 2 complete circles.
What we can do for you folks, though, however, is we can get you a Natural Order podcast window sticker or bumper sticker, So just reach out to me on Twitter X at Brian D. O'Leary or Adam at Rerazer, RERAZER. And then we can hook you up. If that's something you want, rather than having a stupid Tesla owners for
and I've seen those bumper stickers. They're very bland. They don't have any color, no excitement, no fire. And I think ours would have a nice green fire. Yeah, that offer is legit. We'll hook you up.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, this has been great, Brian, and I really encourage people to go to the article. I'm sure we'll find.
Yeah, we'll have it in the show notes, and
it was fascinating.
If not, go to let's say it'll be at Natural Order Podcast, naturalorder.substack.com, and then that way you can link to all of our other stuff as well. So we'll get that taken care of for you.
Perfect.
Yeah, Adam. Good to be back in the saddle once again. And I think any last words?
No, other than to thank you for sharing that article and for writing it and for all the brilliant thoughts and history that was in it. And yeah, please go to hamannature.substack.com. That's HAMAN. And also look for me on YouTube at Haman Nature for my show, which is also available as a podcast.
We should also mention, Adam, that you've been doing a lot of shows with the great economist Robert P. Murphy.
Indeed.
And those have been good.
Go to bobmurphyshow.com to see his version, although it's the same episode. We do these crossover episodes that air on both his channel and mine, and he's smart, those and funny, and those episodes are great. I very much enjoy working with him.
Yeah. All right, guys. Naturalorderpodcast.com is where you go for everything else, and that's the clearinghouse, and we will be back with you soon enough. Take care.